What's up, YouTube? So when I say the difference between anime and manga, that doesn't mean simply just one's animated and colored and one's black and white and in a book. What I mean by the differences is some anime studios would actually take it upon themselves to change the original story from the manga. These changes can range from small changes like what a character's holding or throwing for censorship reasons, to much larger changes such as adding moments for characters and lines for characters, or adding entire episodes that were not in the manga, these episodes typically being referred to as filler episodes. And one of the anime studios that is most notorious for making changes to the manga is called Studio Pierrot. And I think the anime that Studio Pierrot did the most damage to is Naruto. Now again, some of these changes are relatively small, however some of these changes are so large that I think the anime actually deserves a remake for some of these changes alone. So in this video I'm going to be talking about all the changes that Studio Pierrot has made to Naruto that I found so far, as well as explaining my general thoughts on these changes, on whether or not they were necessary or whether or not the anime needs to be remade for how blatantly horrible they were. Real quick though, before we get started, I'm pretty new to YouTube, so if you could like and subscribe to this video, I'd really appreciate it. These long form videos take forever to make and edit, so I'd really appreciate any support you can give this video. With that being said, let's get into it. Chakra is not actually supposed to be blue, and now many people believe it's supposed to be yellow based off covers of the chapters where Naruto is using yellow chakra. However, each character was actually supposed to have individual chakra colors. Some of these examples include Naruto with yellow chakra, Kakashi with white chakra, Sasuke with violet chakra, and Itachi with orange chakra. This actually explains why the Susanoo all have different colors. I hate this change. I really wish each character had individual chakra colors. That would have made them stand out so much more and feel so much more unique for each jutsu that they were using. So I'm not sure why they made this change. I mean, blue definitely pops more than yellow in my opinion, so I get why they did it for Naruto's chakra, but for other people's chakras, I'm not really sure. Maybe it was just easier to animate those all as blue and save money on the budget. The manga is way more graphic, especially when it comes to body horror. These examples range from Zaku's arms being blown off with his fight with Shino, Orochimaru's test subjects when the third Hokage finds his laboratory, seeing Dosu's dead body with the claw marks that Gaara put in him, and Kimimaro literally having to scar himself every time he pulls a bone out, just to name a few. I have more examples for the body horror, but I'll get to that later in the video. I obviously get why the studio made these changes, especially when they were pitching it in the West. They were pitching it more as a children's show, and Cartoon Network would not have aired a rated R animated TV show, especially back in the early 2000s. However, if they're ever going to do a remake, I think they should just show all of these. I really think people are ready for a rated R Naruto. In the manga, the Hyuga are confirmed Nazi supremacists and go as far as to tattoo it on their forehead. Not really. This symbol is actually called a manji, and if you can tell, it's just rotated a little bit differently than a swastika, and it actually derives from Buddhism, which originally got it from Sanskrit, which is an old language from India. I approve of this change. The less things that look like swastikas, the better. In the manga, Tenten's fight with Temari is only a single panel, not like the long, drawn-out ass-whooping that Temari gets to give Tenten in the anime. I've kind of mixed emotions about this one, because on the one hand, I love Temari, and Tenten's the disgrace to all ninjas, so watching her get an ass-kicking is well-deserved. However, more Tenten scenes is always a bad thing, so, you know, take what you can get. Sakura comes across as a much nicer and much more useful character in the manga. Studio Pierrot would often take away scenes where she'd accomplish things, or add scenes where she's hitting someone, especially Naruto, for comedic effect. Some examples, just to name a few: she does not hit Naruto when she first sees him after not seeing him for 2.5 years. She doesn't laugh when Naruto is scared at the first exam. She actually feels bad for him. She saves Naruto from being hit by Zabuza's sword. However, in the anime, he just ducks. Studio Pierrot would even add scenes completely out of nowhere, like this one right here. Who would say this? Who would try to choose a terrorist over their best friend who stuck with them for this entire time? And arguably most importantly, she's not thirsting after Sasuke like he's the last piece of meat at the buffet. I think all of these changes can be grouped together and really are a prime example for why this anime really deserves a remake. Sakura gets a lot of hate online, and honestly, it's from a lot of the scenes that the anime adds, and they're just not in the manga often. In fact, I've seen a lot of people comment who are manga-only readers saying that they never understood the hatred that Sakura got because it turns out it was mostly from the anime. Gaara is shown in the manga to actually have brown hair similar to Kankuro or his father, not like his iconic red hair that he has in the anime. One of the rare changes that I think Studio Pierrot made that I actually approve of. I loved his red hair. In fact, I think it really makes him stand out and appear much more insane. Sakura is not the only character that Studio Pierrot butchers. In fact, Sasuke comes across as a much more likable and caring person in the manga. He's drawn blushing on many instances in the manga. Another instance of just a horrible decision by Studio Pierrot. I know these changes probably don't seem large to them, but these small details can really add up to a character's development and how people can perceive them. Ninetales' cloak Naruto versus Pain is extremely short in the manga, and Naruto dog walks him. It's not close, compared to the anime where they exchange a bunch of Looney Tunes-esque blows. I hate these changes. I get why they did it, they just wanted to extend one of the best fights of the series, but these changes look so much like Looney Tunes cartoon BS when they're fighting in the anime. Shikamaru picks up smoking in the manga after Asuma is killed. He then is never seen smoking again after Hidan dies in the manga. However, he is seen smoking again in Boruto, so it's kind of unclear whether he kicked the habit and picked it back up in Boruto, or he just does it off the screen in the manga. I get why the studio took this out. They didn't want to show a teenager picking up a smoking habit. However, this is a show about ninjas and killing. Let the teenager smoke some. I think it comes across as very touching, like he wants to hold on to any memory he has of his sensei that he can get. Naruto's iconic English catchphrase, "believe it," eventually gets phased out and changed to "you know," because in the English subbed in manga, he says "databoyo," which has no direct English translation and would often get completely left untranslated in the manga. Databoyo was supposed to kind of just be a speech habit that Naruto had that would eventually tie him to his mother later in the story, but I understand why the anime had to change it to something. However, I just wish maybe they would have cut down the number of times he said these things, because in the English dub it just comes off rather obnoxious how often he's just yelling "believe it." Sasuke and Indra actually have different Mangekyo Sharingans in the manga, versus in the anime they both have the star pattern that Sasuke has. Now, this change may seem relatively small, however, it makes the fact that Sasuke is Indra's reincarnation much more obvious. So I don't really understand why they made the change at all. Just keep Indra's Mangekyo original. In the manga, Naruto gets the Scroll of Sealing in episode 1 by using a sexy jutsu on the third Hokage to distract him. I completely approve of the studio taking this scene out. The less we get to see of the sexy jutsu, especially when it's used on an elderly man, the better. Team 7 was trying to commit assault by looking under Kakashi's mask while he was unconscious after the Zabuza fight. The scene is taken completely out in the anime. However, there is a filler episode later in the series where they do try to accomplish this, and they find out that it's just another mask. I don't really understand why the studio took this out. This kind of just seems like a funny character building moment for our team, so I don't know why it was removed. In the manga, the Chidori clearly surrounds the hand with chakra, versus in the anime, they summon a ball of chakra in their hand and apply the lightning change in nature to it. Now, this change may seem small, however, I absolutely despise it, simply being that this is the basis for why there's a difference between the Chidori and the Raikiri, and people online will rage about it, even though originally they were confirmed to be the same jutsu, and Kishimoto just eventually changed it later in the data books. When Naruto and Kakashi's shadow clones go to play rock, paper, scissors during the training for the Rasen Shuriken, in the anime, they gamble to see who will pay for Ichiraku ramen. However, in the manga, they gambled nothing, and Naruto's just as excited for winning there too. I don't really know why they added this scene. I think it's actually a lot funnier that Naruto's super excited over beating Kakashi in something as simple as rock, paper, scissors. Keen actually can't use genjutsu, and her fight with Shikamaru in the manga is very short. I have mixed emotions about this change because on the one hand, they extended a Shikamaru fight, and I love Shikamaru, so any extra scenes I get of him are great. However, this fight is pretty meaningless, so extending it just kind of feels pointless. In the manga, Jiraiya agrees to train Naruto at the hot springs when they first meet and doesn't need to be chased all the way around the village. This change is relatively small, so it doesn't really matter. However, if they do actually ever make a remake, I hope they take all of the scenes like this out. The Shadow Clone Brawl, which Jiraiya makes Naruto use up all of his chakra for the summoning training, is actually anime only, and in the manga, Jiraiya just tells him to continue his Jesus Jutsu training of walking on water. I don't mind this change. The Shadow Clone Brawl was kind of fun and it was short, so who cares? Sasuke and Kakashi show up very quickly after Tamari's match with Shikamaru. There is no extra extension given. Another change that I hate, why add this extension? It just pads the runtime and their entrance was already badass enough. They didn't need extra hype. Characters are not wearing fishnets, they're actually wearing chainmail. I learned this while doing research for this originally. I don't really know why they gave the characters fishnets. I hope it's not for a creepy reason, but if they ever do a remake, I really hope they gave them chainmail because there are some weird people on the internet. Orochimaru's sword, the Kusanagi, is a double-edged sword in the anime. However, in the manga, it comes out as a katana. I don't really care one way or the other, but I guess I like the design of the double-edged sword in the anime better, so keep that. In the anime, the last thing the third Hokage sees before his death is Orochimaru as a child. He never gets any visions in the manga. Another rare win for Studio Pierrot. I really think this change is cute and makes it seem like the third Hokage still cared about Orochimaru even in his final moments. Kishimoto actually drew Gamabunta transforming into a one-tailed fox in the manga. However, in the anime, he transforms completely into Kurama. Now, the reason Kishimoto drew him with one tail in the manga is because Naruto had actually never seen Kurama at this point, so he doesn't really know what to picture him as. But the Nine Tails fighting the One Tails is so iconic, I think they should just keep it as the Nine Tails. When Jiraiya first Rasenguns that random dude from the Hidden Stone Village, he's given his wallet out of respect. However, in the manga, he just robs the dude. And on the way out, he insults him by telling him he was holding back. So he assaults him, robs him, and spits on him on the way out. He doesn't literally spit on the guy though. In the manga, when Sasuke runs up on Itachi offing his parents, his father actually yells out to Sasuke to not come in the room. However, in the anime, Sasuke just hears the bodies drop. Now this change may seem small, however this could have actually been one of the first instances of foreshadowing that Itachi's father was still proud of him even in his final moment, which is why he didn't want Sasuke to come in and see what was happening. When Naruto first returns from the time skip in the manga, he actually meets Kakashi first, versus in the anime he meets Konohamaru and Sakura and gets punched for having a new sexy jutsu. I touched on this in my Sakura point. I hate every edition they make like this because who would hit their friend after not seeing them for 2.5 years? Sasori's Hiroko puppet is never referred to as a human puppet in the manga, so why the anime changes it so that Sasori's sitting inside of a dead corpse, I'll never understand. Kurama is shown flipping Naruto the bird when they reunite in the war arc, versus in the manga he's just yelling at him. I get why the studio made this change, it's for censorship, but I think it's funnier if he's flipping him off, so if they do a remake, leave it in. In the manga, Jiraiya is seen to have a nose piercing. However, in the anime, this is changed into a wart. And it's not really clear if the studio did this on accident because they couldn't tell since the manga is black and white, or if they did it on purpose to give Jiraiya more toad-like features. It's a small change, so it doesn't really matter, but if they're gonna do a remake, give him the nose piercing, give my man the looks he deserves. In an anime filler episode, we actually get to see part of Shino's eyes. However, in the manga, we never get to see any view of them. This change itself doesn't really matter, but I do wish the Konoha 12 got more screen time in the manga. Shippuden is actually an anime-only title, and there's no distinction between pre-time skip and post-time skip in the manga. Now in the anime, there's a large amount of filler after Naruto's fight with Sasuke in part 1, so I get kind of why they had to add a Shippuden to it to kind of show the fans, hey, we're done with the filler, this is new and actually important. However, if they're gonna do a remake, I hope they take this out because it kind of just makes it confusing, and for me, when I was a kid, I didn't know Naruto Shippuden was a thing until I found it in my local library, and I literally picked up a book and went, what the fuck is a sage? The Susanoo in the manga are all shown to have 6 fingers, versus in the anime, they only have 5. It's not really clear why the studio did this. Maybe they didn't notice that the Susanoo all had 6 fingers, or I've heard it's annoying to animate people with 5 fingers, so 6 fingers is probably just a nightmare. But if they ever do a remake, I do hope they give them 6 fingers because I think it makes their appearance seem much more mythical. In the manga, Sakura debating whether or not to destroy Obito's Rinnegan is only one panel between Obito asking her and Madara appearing in their dimension, so that could have only been 1 second for manga time, versus the anime, she debates this for several minutes. This change may seem small to the animators, however to the people who are watching it, it really makes Sakura seem like she's weighing the weight of the world versus this guy's one eye, which doesn't make any sense, especially because this one guy has tried to kill and successfully killed many of her friends. Now, I mentioned that filler episode before where Team 7 tries to figure out what's under Kakashi's mask. However, there is actually a scene in that filler episode which is considered canon because Kishimoto drew it at one of the end of the data books. This is the scene where they take Kakashi to Ichiraku Ramen to try to get him to take down his mask while he's eating. However, both in the anime and in the manga, he eats too fast and they don't get to see it. The glare on Lee's hair in the anime can be seen spelling ninja on occasion. I actually love this edition. It's so silly and it seems like the man's working so hard he's literally got ninja plastered on his forehead. The Kakashi Chronicles in the manga actually came out before the time skip happened. This was a much subtler way of foreshadowing the Obito twist. However, in the anime, these episodes take place later in Shippuden, making the twist appear much more obvious. I hate this change because like I said, it makes the Obito twist much more obvious. I was reading the manga when this was coming out and I had no idea that Obito was Tobi. I mean, I saw the theories online and thought it would have been cool, but I thought it was a possibility, versus in the anime, it's just really obvious. Looking back on it, I guess it would be obvious either way. However, I was a little kid in middle school, so cut me some slack. Orochimaru is seen genuinely sad when he's trying to assassinate the 3rd Hokage, versus in the anime, he's smiling, albeit still crying. Another change that probably seems small to the anime studio, but really adds emotional depth to Orochimaru, showing that he's not just a complete insane serial killer, he did care about the 3rd Hokage. Gaara can be seen early in the manga with 3 ear piercings. This is never shown in the anime and eventually gets removed in the manga. I don't really mind that the anime studio took this out. The manga takes it out too, so who cares? The anime originally shows the Kazekage colors as blue. This is eventually corrected in Shippuden to show the correct manga colors, that being green. This change isn't really a big issue, however it does become confusing later when we get to see more of the Kages, so I do think they should change it to green when they do a remake. Shikamaru was never Naruto's friend in the academy in the manga. That scene where he asks his father what he should do with Naruto, and his father tells him do whatever he thinks is right, is anime only, therefore considered filler. Another scene that I'm relatively conflicted on because on the one hand, I love seeing Shikamaru get to be the nice guy. However, it does kind of undermine a lot of Naruto's complaints early in the series when he said he had literally no one. So I do think they should leave it out if they do a remake. In the manga, Sasuke's decision to leave the Leaf comes after Tsunade heals him from when Itachi put him under Tsukuyomi. However, in the anime, he decides to leave after a filler escort mission where they're escorting Ibiki's brother and Naruto outperforms him. Absolutely hate this change, not just because they added the filler arc, but because it doesn't make any sense. It makes much more sense that Sasuke would leave after being emotionally and mentally scarred by his older brother, not to mention the insecurity he feels by his brother choosing Naruto over him, versus him just being cranky that Naruto did better than him on one mission. The scene where Shikamaru and his father play shogi after Asuma's death and Shikamaru has that outburst is actually anime-only content. This is probably my favorite addition that Studio Pierrot makes across the entire series. I love this scene. I think it's done beautifully and it really shows the emotions that Shikamaru is feeling. Plus, any extra scenes we can get with Shikamaru, huge plus. Speaking of that scene being anime-only, Shikaku actually has virtually no lines in the manga pre-war arc. I love virtually every line addition that Studio Pierrot gives this guy. He is such a cool character. Konohamaru is not nearly as prominent in the manga as he is in the anime. Most of his scenes are actually filler, especially his two sidekicks. Virtually every time they talk, it's filler. I hate virtually all of these additions. Konohamaru, especially pre-time skip, comes across as such a whiny turd, and I don't even know why they give speaking lines to his two sidekicks. They're even worse than Konohamaru. Gamatotsu is a reoccurring character in the anime, however in the manga he only appears during the Sannin showdown. I actually love the anime studio for this. Gamatotsu is the cutest little munchie lover in the entire series. More Gamatotsu! Choji's father can be seen as a member of the team that is sent to chase down Naruto in the first chapter, and he even states that he's ready to kill Naruto. However in the anime he is completely removed from the pursuit team. I like that the studio made this change. Choji's father, Choza, comes across as a much sweeter and caring character later in the series, so it doesn't really make sense that he'd be willing to kill a kid. Zabuza's revenge against Gato is way more cathartic in the manga. He actually beheads the guy, not just stabs him and throws him into the river. Again, another instance of censorship. I get why the studio made this change, but if they ever make a remake, full send the beheading. Gato deserves everything Zabuza does to him. In the manga, the Akatsuki cloaks are initially shown with only one sleeve. This is eventually changed to show them with two sleeves, however in the anime they're always only shown with two sleeves. Not really clear whether the studio did this on purpose or whether or not they just didn't notice that the Akatsuki cloaks had on one arm. However, the change is fine because eventually they make the change in the manga, and Kishimoto actually states that he only made them have one sleeve because it made them look more intimidating, so it's purely for drip. Kakashi's Chidori can be seen going all the way through Haku's chest and even seeing part of his hand come out the other end. However, in the anime, you can only see his hand laying on Haku's chest. I get why the studio made this change, especially in the early 2000s when this was airing on Cartoon Network. However, if they ever do a remake, they should definitely have the hand go all the way through because that's what happens with Rin, so it really adds to the emotional scarring that Kakashi's going through. When Sasuke first uses the Chidori and he's running down the wall, in the manga, he jumps off the wall to the ground and keeps his run going. However, in the anime, he just runs into the ground like an idiot. No idea why the studio made this change. I guess you can say it makes it look more dramatic when he's coming out of a smoke cloud. However, I just think it looks stupid. In the anime, Konohamaru recreates Naruto's iconic ninja registration photo card. The anime even takes this a step further and has Minato do the same thing for his ninja registration photo card. In the manga, neither of the characters do anything like this. I love this addition. I think it's so silly and it really shows Minato's fun side. Ibiki's head in the manga is way more gruesome with entire holes in his head. For instance of censorship, so I get it, but change it in the remake. Naruto actually only lands 2 hits on Yahiko's pain body in the manga. That being when he loses part of his cloak by being blown into the mountain and hitting him with the final Rasengan. However, in the anime, they exchange many Looney Tunes blows in that fight extension. I've done this before. I hate the additions to the pain fight. It looks so stupid. In the anime, Guy and Kakashi are seen meeting up several times during the Konoha Crush arc when they're fighting ninjas. They keep an active count of how many people they've beaten and treat it almost like a game. However, in the manga, this is never shown and every scene of them is taken very seriously. Another addition I have mixed emotions on because on the one hand, this is a war, so they really should be taking it seriously. However, it's so funny to see Guy clearly forcing this game onto Kakashi, but Kakashi's still playing, showing that he does have a rivalry with Guy, so I like it, keep it. There are virtually no cuts between the third Hokage's fight with Orochimaru and Naruto's fight with Gaara in the manga. They each get their respective chapters and there's no real crossover. I hate this change. The fight is so smooth in the manga, however in the anime it's so clunky and so long, it's just obnoxious. Last but not least, Tsunade actually beats Orochimaru with a single punch during the Sannin showdown. However in the anime they're shown to be exchanging several blows. Absolutely hate this change. Tsunade seems so much weaker in the anime than she does in the manga. Beating Orochimaru with one punch is a huge feat. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe to this. Like I said before, making these long form content videos is so much harder to animate and edit. However, if you do like this video, please show the support so that I know it, so that I can make more videos like this in the future, or drop a comment down below on your thoughts of these changes between the manga and anime, and if you thought they made the anime better or worse, or any other anime topics you'd like videos made on. Love you guys.